Hi, my name is Anjali Harish, and this is my project, Do Good Fences Make Good Neighbors? Deception or Diplomacy in Post-World War Haitian-American Relations. My fellow Americans, I just don't know how to go about this. I know what I have to do, but I just can't fathom, how did we get here? How did our relations with our Latin American neighbors sour so terribly? Perhaps, if I look at the past, I can find some answers. What's that? Hello? Hello?
Good morning, Mr. President. I hope I didn't disturb you. I have a matter of grave urgency to speak with you about.
Ah, Mr. Lansing, my Secretary of State.
Mr. President, I'm sure you've heard by now of the tragic events that have transpired in Hispaniola.
Possibly. Refresh my memory.
You know of Sam? President Jean Guillaume Sam, that is, of Haiti? Well, they assassinated him.
What?
Yes. Apparently the whole affair was rather bloody.
Well, why are you telling me this?
Well, it is imperative we do something about the situation. Haiti isn't without a proper leader. President Sam was a sound man and he had our support. The people are rioting in the streets, as they do there, in a most unseemly fashion, I might add, and they're going to tear each other apart. The ambassador makes this especially clear, voicing four major concerns. First, a means of affording immediate protection to foreign American life and property. Second, the administration and maintenance of civil order pending the establishment of constitutional government. Third, the support and maintenance of constituted authority. And fourth, a means of enabling constituted authority permanently to maintain itself.
Oh, is that all?
There is just a bit more, Mr. President. You know how the Haitian people are inflammatory, for lack of a better word. This revolutionary sentiment they indulge in must be quelled. It is the only way they can survive. If I may be so bold, I suggest a diplomatic initiative. Go through all the formalities, sign a treaty. It is a surefire way to communicate with them about what needs to be done.
You make a good point. Thank you.
Good day, Mr. President.
Goodbye. He is right. They never can keep a leader for long. 7 presidents deposed or assassinated in the last 5 years alone. And it is our duty to go and help them before another country comes in and takes advantage of them. Oh my God! They've been flirting with Germany this whole time! How could I have been so foolish? Of course, Germany was just looking for a way in while we are in the middle of a war with Germany! No! We cannot let this happen. It would go against one of the great American documents, the Monroe Doctrine, which dictates that it is a solemn responsibility of the United States to protect the sovereignty of fledgling nations from other countries who would usurp and use them. Although, I prefer to think of it as extending a hand across the fence to help a neighbor in need. It's a brand new day in Port-au-Prince, and I'm the new president, President Philippe Soudre d'Artiganov. I admit, I was a little apprehensive to declare myself as a candidate for this position, especially considering what happened to the last guy, but I have the protection and the endorsement of the United States of America, so everything's going to be fine. My opponents, Rosalvo Bobo and his gakos, will tell you that I just sold off our country to the United States when I did no such thing. They presented me with a treaty, the terms were favorable, so I signed it. In fact, let me just show you. The Haitian-American Convention. The United States and the Republic of Haiti desiring to confirm and strengthen the amity existing between them by the most cordial cooperation in measures for their common advantage, and the Republic of Haiti desiring to remedy the present conditions of its revenues and finances, to maintain the tranquility of the Republic, to carry out plans for the economic development and prosperity of the Republic and its people, and the United States being in full sympathy with all of these aims and objects, and desiring to contribute in all proper ways to their accomplishment. They take care of our funds, there are a few Marine troops stationed across the city to enforce order, and before you say anything, let's be real. We require stability, and I certainly do not want to be torn apart limb from limb in the streets, and I'm sure that my successors would agree. Besides, It really can't get that much worse around here. Oh, yes, it can. Do you see this? Do you all see the mockery they're making of our country? Tachiganabe said that there would be order, that things would be changed for the better, and said people are being chained to iron bars and burned alive in their own houses, while national money is being stored across the ocean in American banks. When he signed the treaty, he signed our lives away. But in the face of tyranny is where revolution rises. As a member of the Revolutionary Committee, I, among many others, challenged legislation and resisted without raising a single weapon. As leader of the Gakos, I urged Haitians of all colors and classes to retaliate physically. Here's a letter that we wrote to one of the congressmen. Today, we lost patience and we reclaim our rights. Rights ignored by the unscrupulous Americans who, by destroying our institutions, deprive the people of Haiti of all its resources and devour our name and our blood. We demand the liberation of our territory and all the advantages given to free and independent states by international law. Therefore, please take into consideration that 10 months of fighting has been in pursuit of this aim, and that our victories give us the right to ask for your recognition. We are prepared to sacrifice everything to liberate Haiti and establish here the principles affirmed by President Wilson himself, the rights and sovereignty of small nations. Please note, honored consul, that American troops, following their own laws, don't have any right to fight against us. Long live independence! Long live the Union! Long live the just war! Down with the Americans! Ladies and gentlemen, the worst has happened. They're calling it the Great Depression, and they're blaming me. Look, I did the best with what I had. I tried to stimulate the economy, even though the stock market had crashed, and now all these businesses are laying off their workers. It's worse than before. Oh, and that isn't even all of my problems. Did you know that we were still in Haiti? Because I practically forgot until they started causing problems for me too. Even after the deaths of their leaders, these people still keep rebelling. To quell this, we had to fire on a crowd of over 1,000 people. And they still don't give up! I don't understand why there's so much dissent. I really don't. We were just following the Monroe Doctrine, doing what needed to be done. And we did a pretty decent job. If you go to Port-au-Prince, it's a beautiful city. Can't say the same since before our intervention. And not to mention the work that we did on the hospitals. Oh, hospitals. Medical care is infinitely better than it was. And not to mention sanitation. The place is actually clean now. Well, cleaner. Look, I did think about pulling us out, but extraction is messy. We've been there for over 2 decades now. What happens when we leave? I sent out a party to scout out the area, headed by W. Cameron Forbes, who advised me against immediate extraction. But to appease the masses, I did relax our presence there, and now we're pulling out in 1934. That's in 4 years. What could happen in 4 years? I think I understand it now. We have thought for so long that it is our duty, our right, to interfere in the inner workings of other countries. We were so convinced that in order to protect their sovereignty, we had to assert our own in their name, but that's not how diplomacy works. I've been working on a little something. I want to see what you think. The good neighbor policy. The noblest monument to peace and to neighborly economic and social friendship in all the world is not a monument in bronze or stone, but the boundary which the United States and Canada, 3,000 miles of friendship with no barbed wire, no gun or soldier, and no passport on the whole frontier. Mutual trust made that frontier. To extend that same sort of mutual trust throughout the Americas was our aim. The American republics to the south of us have always been ready to cooperate with the United States on a basis of equality and mutual respect. But before we inaugurated the good neighbor, there was among them resentment and fear, because certain administrations in Washington had slighted their national pride and their sovereign rights. In pursuance of the good neighbor policy, and because in my younger days I had learned many lessons in the hard school of experience, I stated that the United States was opposed, definitely, to armed intervention. Throughout the Americas, the spirit of the good neighbor is a practical and living fact. The 21 American republics are not only living together in friendship and in peace, they are united in the determination to so remain. If only this policy had lasted. If only when America pulled out of our country, Nicaragua, that this had called the end of American meddling, we could have collaborated and rebuilt everything that had been destroyed. We could have lifted one another up, lifted everyone up. But in 1957, with the Cold War, the US backed Francois Duvalier for president and let him and his son run our country ragged. They were tyrants, dictators. They were so many wicked things, but they weren't communists, so they stayed, and we suffered for it. In 1990, I ran for president. In 1991, I was inaugurated. There was a coup to oust me from my position, and another when I was eventually re-elected, and both times the US took great pains in order to reinstate me, and while I was extremely grateful, I knew that they had ulterior motives. They were banking on naivete that I did not have. It took the US 58 years to recognize Haiti's independence, since of course the US was a slave-owning country at the time, and in fact US policy hasn't really changed. Their priorities haven't changed. In reality, today's American policy is more or less consistent with the way it's always been. Of course the US and the superpowers like it can afford to ignore this. They can afford to burn a country to the ground from the inside and walk away from the ashes like it never even happened. But we must call these things out for what they are. Wilson's intervention in 1915 was an occupation. It was not an act of goodwill or friendship by any stretch of the imagination. And while Franklin Roosevelt's efforts with the good neighbor policy may have been in good faith, and it's a shame that it didn't last, I can't say that I'm surprised that it was so short-lived. I do not believe that America is an evil entity, but this is not diplomacy. Diplomacy is not playing God with the countries that seek aid from you simply because you can. Diplomacy is at its core. It's about communication, collaboration, not control. Good fences make good neighbors, as they say. A good fence in this case being the boundary between assistance and aggression instead of domination in the guise of diplomacy. Thank you.